Can you record sub 37 and share some samples for Wavetable? What is your setup for sitting back and listening to other people's music? Any sort of hi-fi setup? Do you think that studying music at university is needed to get anywhere in the music industry? Do you process your Moog when coming in? You basically want to know how to make your music louder. How profitable or not would it be for a producer to get out to... I've lost myself now. Oh. Hey guys, welcome to the Kane audio vlog. It's Friday, it's time for another Ask Me Anything. Usual rules apply. Comment anything you want below this video and I'll get back to you in next week's video. Before I go to last week's video, is there anything I need to mention? No, I've just been flat out busy working on projects this week, so yeah, I don't think there's anything to update, so let's take a look at last week's questions and see what we've got. Starting at the top, Reality on X Production, link, high five. I heard Sweepable Waveform thing. Can you record sub 37 and share some samples for Wavetable? Hope I'm not being too greedy. No, yeah, that is possible. Yeah, I might at some point put out some wavetables, yeah, I guess a Moog one will be in there as well. Daily Patcher, still have Stoic on repeat. Best EP I've heard in a while. Thank you very much. I sort of get Golden Features Runner vibes from Downforce. The vocals on that track would mix nicely with Downforce for a live set, methinks. I've not heard that track, or I might have heard it but don't know the name, so I'll look into that. Oh, and a question for this week. What is your setup for sitting back and listening to other people's music? Any sort of hi-fi setup? Along those lines, do you buy... Right, let's start with that bit first. I don't really have a setup for listening to other people's music. I mean, I use the studio for that, really. I kind of figure that most music is made in a studio using studio monitors, and that's most likely how the producers, musicians, whoever wanted their music to be heard. That's how they heard it, so I figure that's best for me to hear it. Aside from that, I have a Denon separate sound system with some Mission speakers. They're not the greatest in the world, but they, it's good home hi-fi stuff. Beyond that, I listen to stuff in the car, but even then, actually, because I'm a bit of a car enthusiast, I actually prefer the sound of my exhaust pipe to other people's music. So I don't listen to too much in the car. Maybe podcasts. Yeah, so I don't really have any kind of special hi-fi setup. My Denon hi-fi is probably means more to me sentimentally than it does to me audibly. So yeah, along those lines, do you buy much in lossless or listen on Tidal? I have never used Tidal. I do listen to a fair amount in lossless because I get sent a lot of lossless. However, I'm, as much as I think I have very good hearing and fairly good ears, I'm not one of those people that claims to hear the difference night and day between a 16-bit WAV and a 24-bit WAV or whatever. It's I think anybody who refuses to listen to music because it's a 320 kbps MP3 is probably missing an opportunity to hear some good music. I think, if you struggle, or even a 128k MP3, we can still hear a good song is a good song. And I think, life is about compromise, isn't it? And it's about finding things that we do like in things that maybe we were unsure of. And yeah, so I'm not a lossless snob. And I think at the beginning with lossless, it was kind of silly because it used up loads of space on your hard drive. Nowadays, that's probably not quite as relevant. First of all, because our hard drives now are massive compared to what they used to be. If I think back to like my first computer, I think I bought a 200 megabyte hard drive, and that cost me a fortune to get 200 megabytes. Now my camera has a 64,000 megabyte SD card, and that's kind of just a throwaway thing. So yeah, I think the storage side of lossless is kind of not really an argument anymore. And double down on that because also we stream a lot, and most people's internet connections are pretty solid, so we can pretty much stream lossless stuff without any issue. So yeah, I've got nothing against lossless now. I don't think there's an argument against it, but equally I don't think there's a huge argument for it. And I'm a big user of Spotify. In fact, on that note, I'll drop a link below this video for my Spotify playlist. So I do every couple of weeks or so, I sort of have a binge, and I'll add a load of tracks that I'm just loving for whatever reason. I'll put them in a Spotify playlist. And yeah, I don't, it's not necessarily DJing music or anything like that. It's not pounding techno or whatever. It's just stuff I'm liking. So yeah, I do enjoy listening to music when it comes to stuff like that. And I do have a premium Spotify account, and I do have the high quality bit enabled. But I couldn't tell you if that's lossless or not. I seriously doubt it's lossless. And I don't care either. So there we go. Unknown artist. Hi buddy, hope all's well. All is well, thank you. Question this week. Do you think that studying music at university is needed to get anywhere in the music industry? 100% no. You do not need, and I'm stressing the word need. Do you think studying music at university is needed to get anywhere in the music industry? No, not at all. I studied audio engineering in university, but I was already a professional DJ producer before I did that. I carried on DJing and touring around the world and doing what I did while I was at university. So I'm proof that you don't need that. However, I am a big fan of education in general, and I'm a big fan of learning anything to do with music. So if you have an opportunity to go to university and learn anything from music theory, classical, composition, engineering, whatever, production, then do it, go for it, enjoy it, grab the bull by the horns, because you're always going to learn stuff, and that's always going to be helpful. And if you're looking for a career in the music industry, of course it's going to help. You're going to have a better idea of what you're capable of, and I think that makes a huge difference. If you wanted to be, let's say, a mastering engineer, you could start in your bedroom, set up your own mastering business, online, whatever, and eventually you'll learn the ropes, and eventually, you'll have to charge next to nothing to get started and whatever. It's a long haul. But if a client one day says, I want you to master something of mine in my studio, you're going to kind of freak out because you're going to be facing all sorts of analog hardware that you've never really experienced before, and you're going to have to turn that work down, or not have to, but you're probably going to want to turn that work down because you get scared. If you've been to a university and used a good quality recording studio and you've studied the analog hardware and the engineering side of things, and you know how a compressor works and exactly what every single dial does in an analog compressor, then you can pretty much walk into any studio in the world that has analog compressors and you know pretty much exactly what's going to happen when you turn each dial. I think that's kind of the point of good music education, is that it prepares you for situations that you may not have otherwise expected. So I don't think anybody needs a music education, but I do think everyone will find a music education helpful. But at the same time, if you're going to go to university and do a music course, do not do an easy one. And I'll explain why on that. When I went to university, I think there was like 100 people or something, or 70, 80 people starting year one. There was a competing university the other end of the city that did a course with a very similar name. We were both, I think it was music production and engineering, something like that was the official title, although I think ours changed halfway through for reasons I'm about to say. One of them was a BA, which was Bachelor of Arts, that was the other university, and then mine was a BSc, which is a Bachelor of Science. Those two types of degrees are two very different types of degrees. So one of them you'll do a dissertation, one of them you do a scientific report as your final submissions, and they're two very different paths. Basically, they require two very different understandings of things. But the point I was going to make is sort of by halfway through second year of our course, I think we were down to about 30 people, and the vast majority of people who had left our course went to that other university to do the BA in music production, because they were taught things like how to make a website, how to do social media stuff, how to record a band and set up microphones. Now that's all well and good, and for them they just wanted a good grade, so they went to that university and they probably got very good grades, and that's fine. But in hindsight, I don't know what any of them are doing now, but did they end up in the music industry? Probably not. And if they did they end up in the music industry because of that course? I seriously doubt it. Whereas the guys that completed the course I was on, there weren't many of us that completed it. I think we were down to about 9 in the end, of which I think 7 passed. Because it was kind of hardcore maths and physics and engineering and whatever. And don't get me wrong, I struggled. I'm not great at maths, but the point is that I came away from that course and I loved every minute of it as much as I struggled. But I came away from that course knowing how to build a compressor from scratch, how to design a circuit board, how to build a computer, the maths behind these acoustic panels on my wall and the densities and reflection zones and how it all works, all the physics and psychoacoustics of things like Fletcher-Munson curves. All of these things I use in my job on a regular basis. I just being aware of these things are massively helpful to me in my career, I think. So that's probably a really long-winded, as usual, way of saying education is everything. I'm all over education, especially if it is STEM education, which is science, technology, engineering, mathematics. They're huge, and I couldn't encourage anyone more to go study science, technology, engineering, mathematics, any of those, and you will have a far greater understanding of everything around you and in your life, and is great. There we go. So there we go. I don't think it's necessary because, I mean, look, clearly we don't need university education to become a DJ or a producer or a sound designer or whatever. Nobody needs the education to get there because there's millions of people who are rich and famous and make a career out of these things without having that university education. So they're the proof of that. But I do think it's incredibly helpful. You've also said this excludes the overnight DJ scenario as they're made and didn't really earn it. Yeah, well, I kind of have my own theories about that. First of all, I think the overnight sensation type people who become famous overnight never become famous overnight. You just hear of them overnight. Most of them have already been working for years in advance. And then the select few, which I think you're pointing at, usually have mummy and daddy are in the industry, or Uncle Bob who can backhand a few dollars and make things happen. Yeah, and so yeah, obviously I exclude those because nobody can predict that. It's like winning the lottery as a way of getting rich. Well, it is a way to get rich, but you can't plan for it. You can't aim for that as a life goal. I've lost myself now. Oh, keep up the great work, mate. Have mentioned on Facebook group that Downforce was bloody spectacular. Thank you very much. Edit, just watched the end of the video quoting the twat on the last video. Don't think he'll get any likeable comments from the regulars here, but you certainly said what we're all thinking. You're welcome. I never know how to deal with trolls, to be honest. I apologise for my language, but I don't really give a shit either. So there we go. Dream State 42. Hi Dom, Link, high five. No question this week. I have a lot of experimentation and learning to do now. I definitely did not make the number one mistake of buying too many soft synths in the beginning. Cough, cough. Have a great week. Yeah, so I mentioned last week about buying too many synths. That video I did has now gone live on the channel. So that's the 3 mistakes all producers make. Check it out and give it a thumbs up. Blah, blah, blah. Dan C, Link, high five. Very interesting as usual. Cheers. You're welcome. Casey Music. Let me just check the time. We're good. Hi Dom, thanks a lot for your answers. This week's question would be: do you process your Moog when coming in, or is it just the raw sub 37 power? So thanks in advance. Have a good week. Link, high five. I try not to process anything on its way in. And I've never really understood why anybody would want to. I kind of get it, but I feel like you're backing yourself into a corner. An example being the Apollo audio interfaces. I've not used them, but I know in their trailers they were sort of showing bands setting up and you were using the UAD plugins in real time, and isn't this fantastic because you could apply distortion to your guitar recording on its way in without any latency, and yeah, that's great technologically, but musically, what if you then wanted to try a different saturation pedal or whatever? You've just recorded that as it was, and now you can't go back, so you have to re-record it raw. So for that reason, I tend to not process my Moog through anything. If I process it through anything, it'll be on its way out of the workstation. So for example, some plugins or whatever. Generally speaking, other than maybe a bit of reverb and maybe a bit of delay if it's a lead sound, I don't think I really do any processing on it. It's just raw audio. And in fact, on that note, and I've kind of mentioned this before, but I think it's worth repeating, I leave the latency there as well. I think it's like 20 milliseconds or something. It's quite a big jumper latency. But I don't even look, and I don't care, and I purposefully leave that latency there. Unless I'm going for some really short 16th note, sharp decay, sharp attack, stabby sounds, some intricate sounds. The arpeggiator in Downforce, for example, that big computer sounding, that actually weirdly sounds digital, the arpeggiator in Downforce, the main sound, that's the Moog. I will have corrected the latency on that, but when we're talking about the lead 2-note chords in Stoic or something like that, I'm not going to bother correcting the latency. I'll leave that little bit of 20 millisecond latency. It's absolutely raw. I'll run some feedback and diode distortion on the Moog itself. But again, I don't think I use any processing at all afterwards. Even the filtering I do by hand when I record, and that's just done in, well, I say one take. It's done in one recording, usually about 10 takes where I screw it up. And then I pick the best one. But yeah, so that's, again, it's all completely raw. So there we go. Rod Marconi, Link, high five. Thanks, Don, for taking the time to share your knowledge and answer questions. You mentioned before you will be heading to ADE this year. My question is, how profitable or not would it be for a producer to get out to ADE? That's a really good question, and I don't honestly know the answer, but I would say it's usually more profitable than not. So I think any long-time followers of this channel will know that I'm not the most sociable person in the world, unless there are sort of predefined topics. So, for example, these YouTube videos, fine, not a problem. First of all, I'm talking to a camera, which I know you guys are watching. But they're predefined topics in that I know it's audio engineering, music stuff. I can talk for days, as I do. But going to a cafe, bar, whatever, an event, a seminar, and just randomly talking to strangers, I'm not really very comfortable in doing that. So going somewhere like AD, I kind of need to have reasons to go, preset reasons, which this time hopefully is I'm going to try and get an episode or two of my podcast done, as the plan. But usually when I go to these sorts of events, I'll kind of go there with a plan to get at least one job off the back of it. So, if, for example, you can get a remix off the back of it, then, you kind of covered the costs of the trip, depending on how expensive your trip was. If you can get one booking for one gig, then, you've made huge grounds, and that's really what it's about. But not only that, I find, and I've always said this as well, as much as I'm maybe socially awkward and whatever, a handshake is worth 1,000 emails. Nothing beats meeting someone face to face and saying hello to their face. That's a huge deal, especially in this industry where we all work online, we all send 1 million emails a day, we all receive 1 million emails a day, we all receive spam promos from people who shouldn't be sending promos, of just completely music that shouldn't be in the public eye, and we get sent all of these things. So if the point I'm trying to make of this is that if we're looking at emails, for example, look at the emails in your inbox, and look at all the music that you get sent from people, and a lot of it is completely unsolicited, or it is for me. A lot of it is unsolicited. A lot of it is trash. And then there'll be some gems in there, and those gems are really hard to find. Whereas when you're meeting someone face to face, you can get a scope of their personality. You can get a scope of what they're like as a human. And I think for me personally, if I meet someone at an event and I come away from that event thinking, do you know what, that man or woman was just a really nice person. I got on with them. They had some insightful views, whatever it is. If they were then to send me an email of one of their tracks, I would look at it in a much different light. I hate to admit it, but I would. You know, if someone's a nice person, I'm far more lenient towards how much time I give them, I guess. So if, for example, you are a good quality music producer, whatever, and you're kind of struggling to get things to that next level, I think ADE is a good place to go, or any of the multiple events that happen in countries everywhere all year round. You know, you got IMS in Ibiza, you got Brighton Music Conference in April. IMS is June, May. It's been, I'm pretty sure. I don't know. You've got ADE in October. You got Miami in March. Yeah, so there's loads. So if you're you know, you're wanting to get your record signed or whatever, then you know these things can be handy, because you can go and meet, you know, organise to meet up with an A&R person and get to know them, you know, get to know their taste. You know, just by having conversations with them, you can find out, you know, maybe who their favourite artist is, or what kind of sound they want, or where they think their label is going. And if you think you fit into that, then, you know, having met them, they're far more likely to listen to your music and to give you a bit more time. And yeah, so directly going to these events, maybe not always profitable. I think it depends on how much of a name you have already. So like I say, for people my level and definitely above, but for around my level, I think, you know, you can pretty much get a remix or a gig or something off the back of meeting someone and they go, oh yeah, I remember that guy, we'll have to book him for this gig, or oh, that guy was nice, I'll have to get him for a remix, or whatever, you know. Generally you tend to get some work off the back of it. It's not guaranteed. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Yanis Link, Link, high five. Zombo, thank you for answering my stupid question. Have a great weekend, Link. I can't remember what the question was, but I don't recall there being a stupid one. And I can see my camera's just about to hit reset, so I'll do it before it does it for me. Right. Zombo, thank you for answering. No, answered that one. Dead Mouse Cinco, the Mexican Dead Mouse. Hi Dom, long time no see. Well, to be honest, I had a rough last 3 or 4 weeks because this school year was coming to an end. So I had a lot of exams to deal with, but it went pretty great. I'm happy that I can rest now and spend more time producing and learning new stuff. First of all, congrats on school. And hopefully your results come back good. Well, I learned about the loudness thing, RMS and LUFS, and I saw some standards for RMS and LUFS. How loud should they be and stuff like that? I see in a lot of today's music, people's tracks are hitting 0 dB, and I think the RMS in most cases is probably -3, 4 to -8-ish. But in my tracks, RMS is pretty low, below -10. So my question would be how to achieve good loudness and how to push RMS to go higher, be louder. Thanks ahead for answering. Have a great one. So you basically want to know how to make your music louder. First of all, there's a couple of things you've mentioned in here that I would just cover first. So RMS, forget about it. If I'm honest, don't even look at RMS. It's not really, I mean, it is a measurement, obviously. But the measurement is an odd one with RMS because RMS just means root means squared, which is weird because you square then means and then root. So it's kind of backwards. It should be SMR, not RMS, but whatever. So mathematically you're measuring the average amplitude of a wave. Now to put RMS into perspective, and why I say you shouldn't necessarily use it, is because if you had a sine wave, just one single sine wave, then your RMS, and the reason you root it, mean it, square it, is because if you were to measure the amplitude of a sine wave, it goes up 1 for half a rotation, so +1, then it goes to 0, -1, 0, +1, 0, -1, and so on and so forth. Now, if you were to add all those numbers together, you get 0, because +1 plus -1 plus 1 plus -1, it all equals 0. So, but your average loudness of a sine wave can't be 0. So the reason you find the root of it, and then you average that, and then you square that, is because the square of a negative number becomes positive. So what you're really doing is you're flipping all the negatives to become positives. So it goes +1 0 +1 0 +1 0, and then you measure the average. So the RMS of +1 is, I can't remember, 0.63, something like that. But then when you convert that into dBs, so you're looking at basically -3 dB is a perfect sine wave. So measuring the loudness using RMS is kind of pointless, because really what you're doing is just taking an average. And if you just had a perfect sine wave, then it's going to be -3 dB, and is that loud? Is that quiet? Well, that's got nothing to do with volume. That's got nothing to do with dynamic range, because there's 0 dynamic range, really. I mean, yeah. So anyway, that's kind of my point. So I would say, first of all, ignore RMS. Second of all, I would only deal with LUFS or LUDB, or they're basically the same thing. I would just deal with those measurements because they're probably a better idea. I can't remember the exact maths behind it, but it basically measures over short periods of time and long periods of time, and then compares and averages between the two, and you get a much more accurate measurement. So if a song has some really quiet bits and then some really loud bits, then your dynamic range is going to be quite a bigger number than if it was just loud all the way through. So when it comes to measuring the dynamic range of a track, it's kind of difficult, and there is an exact science, but even the exact science doesn't fit in with what we think is good or bad or whatever, because you might have a track that has a super loud chorus and then a super quiet verse, and there might be more verses than choruses, and in which case the track comes out, when you average it, it comes out as not too loud, but actually the chorus is really loud, but because you're averaging it, it doesn't kind of come out that way. So I think those are things to just be aware of. So when you're comparing it to other people's tracks and you're saying that they come out, where did you say, probably -3, 4 to -8ish, but my track's RMS is pretty low, below -10 dB. Well, obviously I can't hear your music from here, but if you've got a super long breakdown that's really quiet, then your average RMS is definitely going to be quieter than anyone else's anyway, so that, it's going to be below -10 dB. So this is why I say stick to LUFS readings and not RMS readings. Ignore RMS readings because they don't mean anything, and in a way almost ignore LUFS readings, because after having said all of that, you now need to then go, does it sound good? Yes or no? If it sounds good, then it sounds good. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Which doesn't help you with your loudness. So finally, how to push, I'll say LUFS rather than RMS, to be louder. Basically, you want your track to be louder. The only way to achieve that is to remove dynamic range. Dynamic range is the measurements between the loudest parts and the quietest parts. You have what's called microdynamics, which is looking at tiny sections like in between kick drums, or a kick drum, and how loud does one part of the kick drum to how quiet is the other part of the kick drum, and the gaps in between, say, 16th notes or whatever. And then you've got macro dynamics, which is the LUFS type stuff. The only way to really remove dynamic range is to just compress it. So you need to be having gain reduction of, say, 3 dB on a compressor, means that you're squishing it by 3 dB. So it's just a case of adding more compressors to make it louder, really, and maybe a couple of limiters, and bring your limiters down, the ceiling down or whatever. None of these things are things that I want to recommend, because they can, as much as they can make something louder, they can also make something equally shitter. So you kind of have to be careful with that as well. But yeah, a lot of it comes down to the mix as well. And this is, again, why I'm saying to be careful, because, just adding a compressor is not always the answer. And for example, if you're mastering a track and the kicks are 10 dB louder than everything else, you're going to have to limit that track by 10 dB to try and balance the kicks into the rest of the track. So already you've got compressors with gain reductions of 10 dB just to make the track sound normal, or acceptable. So it's really tricky to sort of explain without having thought about it beforehand. So I'm kind of struggling to explain how to get a track louder without having heard the track, because a lot of it comes down to getting the balance right in your mix down, making sure there's no spikes in any sub frequencies, kill off anything below, say, 40 hertz, for example, because you could have some horrible subby bass that's way too low, and that's just draining all the energy out the rest of the track, and then it's never going to be loud because it just suddenly starts distorting. So another way to kind of make your track louder is saturation as well, distorting it and clipping it. But again, there are weird techniques on that. Maybe these are techniques I'll try and cover at some point throughout the life of these YouTube videos. So keep your eyes open, because I might look into trying to sort of make things a bit louder while keeping clarity. So there we go. The other thing, and on that note as well, to kind of write off everything I've just been saying for the last 10 minutes, the loudness thing, we used to refer to the loudness war, which was always about when you're cutting vinyl, you always wanted your vinyl to be as loud as you could get it. But when you're cutting vinyl, the way vinyl is made is it's just like a record player, but in reverse. The needle pokes into the vinyl rather than the vinyl poking the needle out. So the needle presses and cuts into the vinyl, hence the term cutting vinyl. If you had something that was too loud, it would cut through the vinyl. Clearly nobody wants that. That's why compressors were invented, or limiters I should say were invented, were to stop it cutting through the vinyl, which kind of made everything a bit more squashed and a bit less dynamic range. Also, you had things like radio broadcasting, and if somebody's driving their car and the breakdown of a track comes on and they turn the radio up, and then the drop happens and they turn the radio down, nobody wants to be doing that. So finding that sort of equal balance, all of those things, that amongst others, are why compression, limiting, all of these things exist. However, we now live in a world where platforms like YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, I'm sure there are others, where they automatically change the gain of a track, and they measure the LUFS levels of tracks before you hit play. So making your track super loud or super dynamic is almost irrelevant now, because those platforms are kind of adjusting it anyway. So if you make a super loud track, Spotify is going to bring down the level of your track. If you make a super quiet track, you know, Apple Music is going to raise the levels of your track so that it all becomes a uniformed perceived level across everybody else's music. So it's almost an irrelevant question. It's not, because there are caveats to that, things like DJs in gigs, blah blah blah. So yeah, I don't think there's anything else that I need to mention on that. So there we go. Man Oostling. I was the one who said it was boring. Okay, about I think it was one or two of my tracks. Fair enough, not a problem. Andrew Hollis, link, high five. RE the lead question from last week's AMA. Really, Dom, you are rubbish at this self-promotion thing. Cough. Sonic Academy Tech Tips 44 Tutorial 1. Adding live to leads. Cough. And I love the fact that you've put the cough with the / triangle brackets, code words. Yeah, you're right. I do suck at that. So Sonic Academy, what did you say? Tech Tips 44 Tutorial 1, adding life to leads. There we go. Go check that out. BWO official, linked on high five. Abdul Mohsin Alotebe, link, high five. Finfighter, link, high five. And that is it, my friends. Thanks again for listening. It seems to have gone on forever today, and I've got loads of stuff to get on with. So thanks for listening. And if you've made it this far into the video, you deserve a medal. And to prove you've made it this far into the video, comment the word keys. And I will see you this time next week, if not sooner. Cheers.